Both my parents came from the southern part of Sweden. They didn't know English at all, and they came to America and on their own, and managed to I don't know, somehow pick up the language and learn how to be an American. And it was Safejo that my dad came from, and it was Safjo with a umlaut on the O, and my mother came from Oskarsund. They're on a steerage, and probably in the steerage of these big ships that came. Gripsholm was one of them that brought them from Sweden, and they've just, I don't know how they got the money together to even come. You know, they didn't have money. They were poor people. But that's how they got here. They had to learn the language. They didn't even know the language when they came. And they were determined to do that. They were determined to become, American citizens. My mother had an uncle in Ludington, Michigan, and he had a raspberry farm. And so she came there, and my dad had a brother in Chicago who had a moving van business, and so he came to him, and then eventually my mother went to Chicago, and that's how they met. They were 16. They were just very young, and they were married, I don't know, they were in their 20s. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, December the 10th, 1918. South Side. I was an only child. My father was home all the time, and my mother. And I had really no playmates in the area because of what my dad was doing. He was chauffeuring for a very wealthy man, and all the homes on that street had wealthy families, and they didn't have children that were my age, so I had to play by myself a lot. And to think of what I did most was there was a girl next door, Mary, who was 5 years older, and so once in a while I'd be able to go over to her house, or she'd come over in my yard. But for the most part, I had to figure out what to do by myself, and as I went along, I got a bike, and I had a tennis racket that I hit the ball against the wall, and just really nothing outstanding, except when we would go in the summer to Williams Bay, Wisconsin, which was on Lake Geneva. And then life was entirely different, because there was a little boy who was a gardener's son who I could play with all that time. And so summers were a time when there was always a playmate, or maybe a few more than, but it was, I was never lonely. I was always happy. I always had a good life, a happy life. Swedish was spoken when I was tiny, but as I grew up, there was a lot of English that was coming in, because that's what they wanted to learn, and they did, and they eventually, of course, I picked up a lot of Swedish words that I was able to remember later on in life. My mother was a kitchen maid. She learned how to cook because of Mrs. Peterson, who was such a good cook for all those men. And a kitchen maid just cleaned up, and eventually she married and didn't have to work. And my dad eventually became a chauffeur for H.A. Wheeler, and H.A. Wheeler was the president of the First National Bank of Chicago. And he stayed with him until he was 50 years old. So all those young years, he was at home with me because, my mother and I, and he didn't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get a streetcar to go to a factory to work. He was always around, which later on I realized how fortunate I was that I had him all those years to myself. He was such a dear man. When I was 10, the preacher wondered if came to our Sunday school class and wondered if we wanted to belong to Jesus. So we all raised our hands, of course. So I was 10, and then I was baptized at that age with my dad. He was in the baptismal with me. Sometime along the line, I sat and told one of my friends, "Oh, it's not hard to be a Christian." Well, it's one of the hardest things that really is. So it wasn't until I was, 36, when I had a detached retina of the eye and the surgery that followed and all that, the time to recover brought me to know what it is to be a Christian, and that it's one of the hardest things there is to do the all the long suffering and the turning the other cheek and being obedient and really loving the way the Lord loves, and it's a life. I guess it's all your life. You keep learning more and more, and you get closer and closer to the Lord. So it wasn't until I was like 36. I had Carl had just been born, and then this detached retina did it, because I found this wonderful verse, 2 Timothy, 1st chapter, 7th verse, "For I have not given you the spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind." And then from that point on, that's been my verse, because, and I hang on to that. I hang on to a lot of other things too, but that is, I guess what comes through is, if we only were obedient, if we only listened to him, if we only trusted him, if we only realized what he gave up, here I go, for us. Okay. That's what it means, I guess. Death is defeated at that cross. And you can't, my saying that doesn't mean a hoot to you. You've got to have had that experience that you know what I am saying. Because there is such power in this Bible that we don't even, we just take it for granted. We don't even realize what power there is, and how anxious the Lord is that we come to him and believe in him and love him and obey him. That's, I guess that's what it all boils down to. Be obedient. And hey, that's physical too. As bright as flame. Well, this is kind of a funny way to talk about it, but H.A. Wheeler was a trustee, and he could have well afforded to let me go through a Northwestern on a scholarship, but that never would occur to him, of course. So my folks sacrificed to send me to school. It was $1,200 a semester, and that was expensive, because at the time, I think teachers were getting like $328 a year in the 1930s, and you could buy a Model T Ford for, I think, $360, and 2 cents was the average daily hourly wage. When you talk about prices like that, and then to go to a prestigious college like Northwestern, they did sacrifice, and I didn't get a scholarship, and I managed to get through okay. I was not brilliant or anything, and the master's program was such a unique thing because you would work half the time you had a job teaching and half the time you were going to school. So within 2 years after I got a bachelor's, I got the master's. And so that's how that happened, which helped all the way through. From that point on, you got a little bit more salary because you had a master's. But the first year of teaching, I got $1,800. So that was 1942. So they'd come a long way then. Well, I was a friend of his sister, and I really liked his brother, but he didn't pay attention to me. And he was my age, so it would have been a very nice thing. It was a little bit better looking than Al, but not as nice. Okay, so Elizabeth and I were going to go ice skating, and she couldn't make it, and she wondered if it was okay if Bud took me. Oh, I said, sure. Well, that was it. That was the beginning of it. It lasted almost 70 years, 69 years. I started out as a high school teacher in Barrington, Illinois, and I taught there a couple years, and then we got married, and we moved, and we went to Salem, Ohio. And Salem, Ohio, I was in the high school for 1 week, and the superintendent came to me and wondered if I would help Sally Wilson, who had 90 kids, 90 in kindergarten. And I said, well, I don't know the first thing about kindergarten. Well, he thought I could help her, so I did. So in the morning, I would teach. In the morning, Sally took care of the class, and I watched her, and then in the afternoon, I did what she did, and so we helped one another that way. Sally was a fantastic person, and, I knew her all my life. And then we left Salem because Al went with Crane Company in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that's when just prior to that, I'd had that detached retina. So I was out of commission for all those years, and I didn't teach at all down in Chattanooga. Coming back to this area, Livonia, what else could I get a job in? Anyway, there were 4 openings in kindergarten, so guess what I got? I got a job in kindergarten. Stayed there 3 years, then I was a helping teacher, then I was a media teacher, then I worked for the county in some program that they had. Then I got a job with, and this is all in Clarenceville's district, and then I was sent to be a consultant with Michigan State internship program, which was fantastic. And then I came back to 3rd grade in Clarenceville, and then kindergarten, and then guess what? I ended up teaching English in the high school. So I began with English and I ended with English. Because I was a teacher, I was able to have the summers off. And because we invested in T. Rowe Price, everybody listen to that one, T. Rowe Price. And we got $5,000 every June. And that $5,000 was used to travel. So we went to Sweden 3 times. We went to Israel and Egypt and the Holy Land. It's really, they say everybody should go. Well, yeah, it is such an eye-opener. It's such a different land and culture. Piano?
Yeah.
I never did. I never learned to play it. I had 8 years of lessons and never learned to play it. But I will play Marquita for you. You want me to play it now? 8 years of piano. That's a lot. Oh dear. I don't have the coordination. That's just, it's a waste of time, waste of money. But it was a lot of memory. I learned a lot of memory, memorized pieces. So maybe that was a trouble. I wasn't taught how to chord, and I wasn't taught the technology. At 97, you begin to wonder, what am I around for? What do I do? What use am I? Okay, then all of a sudden this verse came, and it's Jeremiah 29:11, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, to give you a future and a hope." Well, that changed my attitude a lot. And then then I thought, well, if we seek God's wisdom and His help, He has promised never to forsake us. And He also says that in Timothy that He has given us power, so that if we just take Him at His promises, His gift, His truth, and this is what I want to end with, if we believe in Him, trust in Him, and obey Him, we're well on our way to understanding what life is all about. It's big challenge. It's a big challenge. Oh my. So that should do it.
The British Museum had lost its charm. How long, I wondered, could this thing last?